Subscribe to my YouTube channel for more incredible stories that will touch your heart. Now, let's dive into today's story. Mia clutched the straps of her worn-out backpack as she stepped out of the crowded city bus. The towering gates of the Grand Kingston Palace loomed before her, their intricate gold designs a stark contrast to the life she knew. Taking a deep breath, she adjusted her faded maid's uniform and tightened the scarf around her dark curls. It was her first day working as a cleaner in the palace of one of the wealthiest business tycoons in the country. For most people, stepping into a place like this would be a dream. But for Mia, it was just another job, another struggle to make ends meet. At 22, she had already seen more hardship than most. Raised by a single mother who worked herself to the bone to provide for her, Mia had learned early on that life wasn't kind to the poor. And now, after losing her mother to illness and being left alone in the world, she was doing whatever it took to survive. The palace was breathtaking, almost unreal. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and paintings that probably cost more than everything Mia had ever owned. The other maids barely noticed her as they hurried past, each carrying out their duties with silent efficiency. It was clear that in a place like this, staff were expected to be invisible. "Hey, new girl." A sharp voice cut through the grand hallway. Mia turned to see an older maid, her face stern and unyielding. "No staring. Do your job and don't ask questions. The lady of the house doesn't like unnecessary chatter." Mia quickly nodded and lowered her gaze. She had no intention of drawing attention to herself. The last thing she wanted was trouble. For zounds! The next few hours, she scrubbed, dusted, and polished, trying her best to ignore the whispers of luxury around her. But no matter how much she tried to focus on her work, one thought kept nagging at the back of her mind. Who was the woman who lived here? Everyone knew her name. Victoria Kingston, a billionaire CEO, a powerful businesswoman, and one of the most influential figures in the world. But despite her fame, she was a mystery. Hardly anyone saw her in person. The only thing people knew for sure was that she was ruthless in business and fiercely private about her personal life. Mia had no interest in the lives of the rich and powerful, but something about this place made her uneasy, like she was walking through a dream that felt strangely familiar. And then it happened. While cleaning one of the private offices, Mia accidentally knocked over a stack of papers. As she bent down to pick them up, her eyes landed on a photograph half hidden beneath the desk. Her breath caught in her throat. It was an old picture, slightly faded, but there was no mistaking it. A woman holding a baby. The woman's face was younger, softer. But Mia recognized her instantly. Her heart pounded as she reached for the photo, her hands trembling. It was her mother, but that didn't make sense. Why would her mother's picture be in the palace of a billionaire? And who was the baby in her arms? Mia's stomach twisted as a terrifying thought crossed her mind. She stared at the baby in the picture, her fingers tracing its tiny face. The truth slammed into her with the force of a hurricane. It was her. This couldn't be real. There had to be some mistake. She felt dizzy, her mind racing with questions that had no answers. Why was her mother in this picture? What connection did she have to Victoria Kingston? And if this woman truly was her mother, then why had she been abandoned? The sound of approaching footsteps jolted Mia back to reality. She shoved the picture into her pocket and quickly continued cleaning, pretending as if nothing had happened. But inside, everything had changed. She needed answers, and she was going to get them, no matter what it took. Mia's hands trembled as she tucked the photograph deep into her pocket. Her heart still racing, she forced herself to keep scrubbing the marble floor, but her mind was spinning. Nothing in her life had ever prepared her for this moment. Could it be true? Could Victoria Kingston, the untouchable billionaire, really be her mother? It sounded impossible. Mia had spent her entire life struggling, barely surviving, and the woman who had abandoned her had been living in this golden palace all along. She bit her lip, trying to push down the emotions bubbling inside her. Anger, confusion, pain. For as long as she could remember, her mother, Sarah, had never spoken about Mia's father. Any time she had asked about her past, Sarah had brushed it off with a sad smile. "All that matters is that I love you," she would say. "You're my whole world." And now, she was gone. Mia blinked away the burning in her eyes. There was no one left to give her the truth. No one, except Victoria Kingston herself. But confronting a woman like her, it was impossible. She was just a maid, a nobody in this world. Still, as she moved through the palace, Mia started paying attention. She listened when the other maids gossiped in whispers, catching small pieces of information about Victoria. She observed the people who came and went, business partners, staff, even distant relatives. But Victoria herself, she remained a ghost. Days passed, then a week, and then, one evening, Mia got her chance. She was assigned to clean Victoria's private study. The room was rarely used, but tonight the lights were on, and the door was slightly open. Mia peeked inside cautiously. There she was. Victoria Kingston. Mia's breath hitched. The woman stood near a grand wooden desk, flipping through a file. She was striking, tall, poised, and elegant. Her sharp eyes moved across the papers, her expression unreadable. Even without makeup, she looked powerful, like someone who owned the world. Mia hesitated. She knew she should just do her job and leave. But before she could stop herself, the words slipped out. "Why do you have a picture of my mother?" The sound of her own voice shocked her. Victoria's head snapped up. Her eyes locked onto Mia, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The silence was suffocating. "What did you just say?" Victoria's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Mia forced herself to stand tall. "I found a photo of my mother in this house, in your office." Her voice shook slightly, but she didn't back down. "Why do you have it?" Victoria's expression didn't change. She studied Mia for a long time, her gaze unreadable. Then slowly, she set down the file and stepped toward her. "What's your name?" Victoria asked. Mia hesitated. Was this a trap? Was she about to be fired? But there was no turning back now. "Mia," she said quietly. A flicker of something, shock, recognition, maybe even pain, flashed across Victoria's face. It was gone in an instant, replaced by cold indifference. "I don't know what you're talking about," Victoria said flatly. "You must be mistaken." Mia clenched her fists. "I know what I saw." Victoria's jaw tightened. "You're just a maid. I don't owe you any explanations." The words stung more than they should have. Mia felt the anger rising in her chest. "You're lying," she said, her voice shaking now. "I can see it in your eyes. You know exactly who my mother was. And if you're hiding something, I will find out what it is." Victoria's gaze darkened. For the first time, she looked unsettled. Mia didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked out of the study, her heart pounding harder than ever. She had pushed too far. Maybe she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. But she didn't care. She needed the truth, and she wasn't going to stop until she got it. Mia's footsteps echoed in the long, empty hallway as she stormed away from Victoria's study. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst out of her chest. She had just confronted one of the most powerful women in the world, and she hadn't backed down. But now, she wasn't sure what would happen next. Would Victoria fire her, have her thrown out of the palace? She didn't care. She needed answers. The next morning, Mia expected a call from the head housekeeper, telling her to pack her things. But instead, something else happened. A note slipped under her small room's door. Meet me in the West Garden, midnight, come alone. Mia's hands trembled as she held the paper. There was no name, but she knew exactly who had sent it. That night, when the palace was silent, Mia tiptoed past the sleeping staff quarters and stepped into the garden. The air was cool, and the moonlight cast shadows over the trimmed hedges and marble fountains. Victoria was waiting. She stood near a stone bench, her arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Mia swallowed hard, but forced herself to step forward. You wanted to see me. Victoria took a deep breath. For the first time, she didn't look like the untouchable CEO. She looked hesitant, vulnerable. I knew this day would come, she said quietly. I just never thought it would be you. Mia's heart clenched. So it's true. Victoria nodded slowly. Yes. The word hung between them, heavier than anything Mia had ever felt. I gave birth to you, Victoria admitted, her voice softer than before. But I wasn't ready. I was young, reckless. My career was just starting. She hesitated. I was selfish. Mia's throat tightened. You abandoned me. Victoria flinched. I thought I was doing the right thing. The right thing? Mia's voice broke. You left me with nothing. My whole life I struggled. I lost my mother, my real mother, without ever knowing the truth. Victoria's eyes filled with something Mia couldn't quite place. Guilt? Regret? I never stopped thinking about you, Victoria admitted. I knew Sarah would take better care of you than I ever could. Mia felt like the ground was shifting beneath her. You knew her. She was my best friend, Victoria whispered. She was there when I found out I was pregnant. When I broke down, terrified. She was the one who told me she would raise you as her own. I thought I was giving you a better life. Mia let out a shaky breath. Everything she had ever believed was turning upside down. Then why keep it a secret? Why never reach out? Victoria's expression darkened. Because I was a coward. She looked away for a moment, then met Mia's eyes again. By the time I realized I had made a mistake, too much time had passed. And then Sarah. She swallowed. She got sick. I thought about telling you the truth, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd hate me. Afraid I wasn't the mother you needed. Mia's chest ached. You were right, she said. You weren't. Victoria's face crumpled for just a second, before she masked her emotions again. I know. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the rustling of the trees. Mia wanted to scream, to cry, to demand more answers, but instead, she just stood there, feeling the weight of everything. Finally, she asked, So what happens now? Victoria let out a slow breath. That's up to you. Mia studied her for a long moment. She had spent her whole life wishing for a family, for someone to tell her where she truly belonged. And now, she had finally found the woman who had given her life. But Victoria wasn't the mother she had needed. That role had belonged to Sarah, the woman who had loved her, raised her, and sacrificed everything for her. No, Victoria wasn't. Her mother. But she was part of her story. Mia wasn't sure if she could forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she also knew she didn't want to carry this anger forever. She took a deep breath. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said honestly. But I do know I deserve the truth. So if you want to be in my life, prove it. Show me you're not just running away again. Victoria's eyes shone with something like hope. I will. Mia wasn't sure if she believed her. But maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of their story. Maybe it was just the beginning.